Official Bunny TV.
Hey guys, so it's me, Nicolette Mashile, and today I want to talk a little bit about skoloto, debt, and just changing the way we think about debt. Now, I want to talk to you guys about a book that I'm reading currently. It's called Budgeting Sucks, and it's written by Garrett Gunderson. He's the same guy that wrote Killing the Sacred Cows, right? And basically, he made me change my mind in the way I see things when it comes to finances. Now, you guys know, if you've been following me for the last 3-4 years, you know how I feel about debt. I'm always that person that says, you need to get rid of debt. You need to get rid of debt as quickly as possible, because debt ultimately is taking away money that you should be investing and money that you should be using to grow your other money, or money that you should be preserving for your financial goals. But he's now challenged my mentality when it comes to money. And it's quite interesting because you can see basically in the way I've been coming along in the past 4 years that I've kind of started reshaping the way I see skoloto and the way I see debt and the way I see expenses and what I should be spending my money on, right? But remember that none of my videos constitute as financial advice. If you are looking for financial advice, please speak to somebody who is certified and registered with the FSCA. Now, obviously, in South Africa, when we teach about debt, most of the financial institutions, when they speak about debt, they speak about good debt versus bad debt. Sometimes they even include the ugly debt. And the ugly debt would be debt that you are using to really fund your life, and it's like luxury stuff that you're paying for, but you're being charged very high interest rates, right? And the bad debt could be maybe you using your credit card to fund your life. So let's say the ugly debt would be you taking out a loan to throw your 30th birthday party. And the bad debt would be you putting your entire 30th birthday party on your credit card. And then your good debt would be you maybe taking yourself to school for your 30th birthday party. So that's how we generally differentiate debt in South Africa. But Garrett says, you know what, actually, for us to move away from the scarcity mentality basically is the mentality that says that we need to reduce and reduce and reduce and reduce for us to be able to save and save and save and invest, right? But he says, let's be honest, we're not all coming from the same backgrounds, we don't all come from the same household. So to tell people to reduce and reduce and reduce and reduce, it's actually very dangerous, because you can only reduce so much until you run out of things to reduce. So he's saying there is a limit to what you can or how much you can reduce. But when you look at the abundance lifestyle, which is what he wants us to move to, the producer lifestyle, so it's a consumer versus producer lifestyle, or the scarcity versus abundance lifestyle. And he then says that with the abundance lifestyle, we should be encouraging more people to produce and produce and produce, because producing is infinite, right? It has no limitation. You can produce more. So he says, instead of saying to people, eat less pie, we should be telling people to bake more pie. But the reality is that there are people that might have developed bad habits. So when we say reduce, we're talking to those people who have those bad habits where they are spending their money and they've got these expenses that they should be cutting out. But it doesn't mean that all expenses need to be cut out. Sometimes your expenses are needed so that you can build yourself or bake yourself more pie. So how then do you find the right ingredients for you to build more pie, instead of us saying to you, eat less and less and less and less pie, because eventually you're going to run out of pie, right? So he says then use expenses, and there are certain expenses that you should be using to be able to now bake more pie. So there are 4 types of expenses that he speaks about, and he says only one of those expenses needs to be taken away. And I'm going to read the 4 expenses that he talks about is your destructive expenses. Then he speaks about lifestyle expenses. He speaks about protective expenses, and he speaks about production expenses. So I'm sure by now you can already figure out which expenses need to go, right? And the expenses that need to go is your destructive expenses. And basically your destructive expenses are those expenses that I spoke about when I spoke about ugly and bad debt. These are expenses that ultimately are funding the luxury lifestyle in you. And that lifestyle is often fueled by your money personality, the way you see money, the way you look at other people's money, and comparing yourself to other people. And remember, comparison is the biggest thief of joy, right? So a lot of us, what we do is we want to live this luxury lifestyle, and instead of saving up for this luxury lifestyle, we then want to put this luxury lifestyle on a loan. We're going to take out a loan to throw ourselves ourselves this luxury birthday party. We take out a loan to go throw ourselves these island weddings or whatever weddings. And by the time the wedding is done, instead of being left with great memories of your weddings, you are left with a loan that still needs to be repaid. And instead of going on holiday and saving up for the next 12 months so that next year in March, you are able to go to your Thailand or your Dubai where Corona will no longer be a thing, you are now putting that holiday on your credit card. Or perhaps maybe you are on holiday let's say, for instance, you are on holiday in New York and you had planned and you had budgeted, and all of a sudden you get told that there's an NBA game somewhere, or you can go ice skating with whichever celebrity that is your favorite celebrity. And instead of pinching yourself and saying, I didn't budget for this, I cannot afford to do this right now, what you then do is that you pay this off with your credit card. Ultimately, these destructive expenses don't add value to your life. At the end of the day, they don't change the balance sheet of your life. They don't change that bottom line figure in your life, right? And then he speaks about protective expenses. And basically your protective expenses are expenses like your insurance, things that you pay so that you can protect yourself, number one, because remember, you are the most important asset, and it's important that you yourself are protected, whether it's protecting yourself through an emergency fund so that you don't go into financial distress if something is to happen. Like for instance, right now, a lot of people, when we talk about the coronavirus, we talk about hitting hard, mostly the poor people, because the poor people can't go into self-quarantine. These are people that have jobs that need to be in the office space, so they can't take a day off or a week off. And when they do get sick, they only will start taking a day off or the time off when they are really sick. Why? Because they're poor and they work in these spaces where they have to be at work, and they force Stella to go to work because their type of work is either a no work, no pay type of a job. So these are the people that get hit the hardest. That's why an emergency fund is really, really important. Things like life insurance, things like car insurance, things like having credit insurance on all your debts, things like having retrenchment cover on one of your insurance policies, having that as a value add to one of your covers. So these are your protective expenses. They are very important because at the end of the day, they actually facilitate a better life for you because they protect you, number one, as the most important assets, but also what they do is that they protect the things that you have already paid for with your money. So for instance, a car is a depreciating asset, right? But in other instances, a car does add to the value of your life, and it does add to the value of, or not the value, but the money-making opportunities that you have access to. So it's one of those assets that, although it is depreciating, you still need to be able to protect it because it ultimately funds a different other part of your life, or it facilitates your money-making opportunities or your opportunity-creating channels, right? And then he speaks about your lifestyle expenses. Now, your lifestyle expenses are also very important because at the end of the day, we don't want you to be a millionaire, but a very depressed millionaire, or a millionaire or a person who's got a lot of net worth, a lot of money, a lot of assets, but you're kind of working so hard to be able to get them. Every single time you think of going on holiday, you're putting it off because you're like, geez, I could be using this money for something else. It's important as a human being to be able to strike a balance, and your lifestyle expenses come into this, play into in this sphere because they ultimately make you the person that you are. If you know you're the type, and it goes back to Ramit Sethi's money dials. Remember, we spoke a little bit about the money dials, didn't really get into it, but I'll get into it on a different video. And the money dials basically say, instead of you trying to figure out how to best spend your money, figure out what makes you happy and rather channel your money into the one thing that you know that makes your life happy. Because once you do that, you won't then try keep channeling money to things that don't give you that self-satisfaction. At the end of the day, we want you to be satisfied because you're waking up every single morning. I mean, most of the people that I speak to, when you ask them, why did you do this with the money? But I'm the one who's waking up every single morning. But you are pumping money into gym because everybody says gym is a good thing because it's a healthy lifestyle, but you don't derive any satisfaction from gym. So what you're doing now, essentially, you're paying a gym membership, and then you end up not going to the gym, but then you want to channel more money to doing your nails every single week because that's what gives you satisfaction. Which at the end of the day, you should have, rather than put more money into the dial that actually makes you more satisfied, channel that gym money into, your nails and do your nails, be happy, be a happier person, and maybe jog or have more sex. I mean, that should help you in exercise. I think that's what they said. You know, I'm a virgin. We don't speak about that here on my channel. And the last expense that you should be thinking of creating or keeping is what is called your producer expense. And basically your producer expense, so he talks about this. He says, if you go and buy a 300,000 Rand apartment, you buy a 300,000 Rand apartment, but you get it at 200,000 Rand. So the value of the apartment is 300,000 Rand. And then you take out a home loan of 200,000 Rand. Then you find it, so let's say for instance, a 200,000 Rand, let's say for instance, you're paying 2,000 Rand every single month on that home loan, right? Or your bond now. And you get a tenant who's paying you 2.5. Ultimately, outside of any other expenses, you are able to use the tenant's money to be able to pay for the 2,000 Rand that you owe the bank every single month. So you've got a disposable income of 500. Now, obviously, as I said, outside of any other expenses, levies, rates, all those kind of things. So ultimately, he asks you this question. He says, how much do you really owe? What is your actual debt on that apartment? And he says, you don't actually have debt. You have a 2,000 Rand liability that you got to pay every single month to the bank. But because your tenant is paying you that, you actually don't have any debt on that. And he says that we need to kind of re-look at what the real definition of debt is. Because a lot of us look at liabilities and we make liabilities a debt. But because we're able to fund those liabilities, we should be seeing them as more of a producer expense. Because ultimately, a property like that, which has a higher value, will give you more value ultimately. So you actually are putting more into your pocket than what you're actually taking out. And that for me was like, wow, okay, this is a different way of seeing debt. And you were saying it's important to always see debt and use debt under that producer expense as something that adds more into your pocket. It may temporarily take something out, but if you actually look at it, how much is it really taking out? And can you actually fund what it's taking out versus what you're actually going to get back in, which is far larger than what you actually took out. So yeah, guys, those are the 4 different types of expenses. I'm hoping that this video also stops you in your tracks about the way you see debt, because ultimately what we want to do is to get to a point, because part of your wealth architecture is getting to a point where you actually understand how to use debt as well as positive, as well as possible. Wow, so but remembering that you've got to have the discipline, because at the end of the day, what most of us do is that we channel a majority or higher percentage of our incomes to the destructive expenses. And sometimes we've got an unnatural imbalance when it comes to channeling money into our lifestyle expenses, whereas a bigger chunk of your expenses should be spent under the producer a band of expenses. So it's very, very important. And then in the next video, what I would like to talk about is what is called the cash index. And basically, this also challenges my mind in terms of how do you reduce debt? He talks a lot about cash flow, and he says cash flow is very important because cash flow gives you a, you know, when you're doing on your marks, on 100 meters, on your marks, ne? And then some people get put like maybe 20 meters into the 100 meters and you are behind. So cash flow basically gives you that advantage. That little bit, that 20-meter advantage is a huge gap, because if an opportunity comes up and you've got cash flow, you can take advantage of it. So like for instance, right now with the coronavirus, people that have cash, people that have liquidity right now are able to take advantage of whatever opportunities are available, especially in the stock market, where most stock markets are taking a beating. If you do have that cash flow, you may be able to take advantage of it. And he says that the debts that are actually, it's called the cash index something, but I'll figure it out in the next video and you guys will know. So I wanna go through Garrett's book in the next couple of videos, and it will be part of the quiz at the end of the month. Remember, we're running a new competition on the YouTube channel where I'm going to ask you on the 31st of March. I'm going to put out a video asking you guys some questions about the videos that I've posted throughout the month, and you can stand a chance to win some money. So yeah, be on the lookout for that. But anyway, mwah.